John Cena's final world title run in WWE ended less than a week ago at this point of recording. He lost the title in the main event of SummerSlam Night 2 to Cody Rhodes. And I think that now is a good time to go back and look at this title run to really analyze how good it was because it was heavily held up by nostalgia and the crowd feeling like they are a part of this sort of sentimental piece of history with John Cena's final title run. But was it actually good? I feel like in most parts you could right off the bat say no, it wasn't good. The story didn't make a lot of sense. The matches weren't necessarily great. Some of the feud pairings weren't what you hoped they would be. But we're going to look at the whole thing today. We are going to go beat by beat, starting at the Royal Rumble 2025 and ending at SummerSlam Night 2, and look at every single piece of John Cena's title run, both after winning the title at Mania and the lead up beforehand. And we're going to really analyze, was this good at all? Was there some redeeming factors to this? What were the high points? What were the low points? We're going to look at everything in it, sort of making a timeline of his title run. If you guys like the video, please consider liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, as it really does help a new channel like mine to grow. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. My name is Isaiah from Hot Tag Wrestling, and we are starting at the Royal Rumble 2025. We're going to start at the beginning of the year with the Royal Rumble, the first match John Cena announced himself in his retirement tour in 2025. For some statistics, he entered 23rd. He lasted 30 minutes and 31 seconds, eliminating Finn Balor, Logan Paul, and Braun Strowman on his way to being the Royal Rumble runner-up, last being eliminated by Jey Uso for Jey Uso to win the match. In terms of a match, I don't feel like this was a strong point in the run. The Royal Rumbles this year, I feel, weren't really that great. The men's was better than the women's, to be sure. But even then, it was just sort of a bunch of guys go in there. Not really a lot of the interesting story beats until the end of the match. But in terms of character motivating stories for John Cena and Jey Uso, I thought this was fantastic. I really loved it because going into this match, there were a few people who everyone had pegged as winners. In my mind, in the minds of some other people, it was CM Punk. But more so than him, I think John Cena was the favorite to win this match. So after Roman and Seth and Punk get eliminated, and then Paul's thrown out after that, and you're just left with Jey Uso versus John Cena, it was sort of dead on, so obvious that Cena was going to win the Rumble. And then he didn't. He got thrown out by Jey Uso. And it worked on two regards. One, it really emphasized Jey Uso's character trait of being the underdog babyface who no one believed in, which informed his match with Gunther at WrestleMania. It was a really shocking victory. I remember when I was watching it, my wife was next to me, and she doesn't care about wrestling that much. She just sort of puts up with it because I love it. But when Jey Uso eliminated John Cena, we were both sitting slack jawed on the couch, going, "What the heck?" It was so sure that John Cena was going to win. Which also informed his character going forward, is now getting a little bit more desperate to getting a world title shot at WrestleMania, because he was so sure on to be the winner of the Royal Rumble, and he lost that. He let it slip through his fingers right at the very end. So now he has to find another way to get that title match at Mania, which led us to the Elimination Chamber. And this also, I feel like, was a really great piece of storytelling while also being a great match. I feel this was, in my opinion, the highlight of Cena's title run. Is he was in the Elimination Chamber. He entered fifth, and he was one of the final two competitors with CM Punk, who entered sixth, I think. And he eventually made CM Punk pass out to win the match. But he didn't do it in the way you would normally associate John Cena with winning. He wasn't Super Cena here. He had to cheat to win. when CM Punk I think he just eliminated Seth Rollins, and then Seth came back and stomped CM Punk. Then John Cena pulled him into the middle of the ring and put the STF on him. And while Punk was in the STF, John Cena was saying, "I'm sorry." He was like crying out to him, "I'm sorry," because he was so desperate to get that match at Mania. And CM Punk did eventually pass out, and John Cena won the chamber, and he was going to go face Cody at Mania. I thought it was a fantastic piece of storytelling because you are sort of able to maintain the integrity of John Cena's babyface run there, but you're starting to sprinkle seeds of a heel run. One thing I didn't mention during the Royal Rumble that I feel was fantastic and not a lot of people mentioned is that when John Cena got eliminated, he got back in the ring after, grabbed Jey Uso's arm and like spun him around and was getting right in his face, like being really, really aggressive with him. But then, sort of shook his hand and held his hand and let bygones be bygones and continued as a babyface. And then in the chamber, he was largely being a babyface right up until the end where he had to cheat to win. I feel like it was setting up a really, really fantastic heel turn at WrestleMania where the fans are starting to question, is John Cena really the good guy we used to think he was? Or is he so scared that he won't win a world title in this final run that he will have to turn heel on Cody Rhodes at Mania and cheat to win somehow? I feel like the story progression through Rumble, through Chamber, leading to Mania was so perfect and so perfectly mapped out. And then The Rock came. The Rock has been one of the most pivotal figures in WWE this year, while only being on screen like once or twice. He showed up at the Elimination Chamber, and I don't think he has been back on WWE since then, which is crazy because he's had such a huge impact on the product. He is the president or the CEO or something of TKO, which is the company that owns WWE. So he has some creative and executive power in the company. And he, for this decision, essentially overrode Triple H. It seemed like the original plan was to have John Cena slowly start to implement some more heel work like we saw in the Rumble and like we saw in the Mania, a little bit more cheating and a little bit more negging that we don't normally see out of babyface Cena into his repertoire leading up to Mania, where I envision he would be fighting Cody Rhodes, and there would be a couple really close kickouts off a Cody Cutter, off a Crossroads, and Cena sort of getting desperate to beat him because he really, really wants to be a world champion in his final run. So he sort of turns his back on all of the virtues that he's had throughout his entire career and turns heel in the match to win the title and cheats to beat Cody Rhodes. That's where I feel they were going with this. But then The Rock sort of just weaseled his way right in there and said, no, Cody's going to turn, yeah, actually, he did say Cody's going to turn. The original plan was to have Cody Rhodes turn heel, not The Rock, not Cena. But Cody shot down that plan because he saw how terrible of an idea that would be. And so the idea was pivoted to have Cena turn heel and join The Rock. And that's a really cool idea. John Cena and The Rock being the top heels in WWE, sort of trying to push down and marginalize the younger talent that are trying to make their way up the card, and sort of the current era of baby faces like Cody Rhodes and LA Knight and Jey Uso, really trying to push them down so they can elevate themselves up. But that's not what we got. The Rock hasn't been on WWE TV since. He hasn't had any sort of presence in the storyline since the heel turn. So this idea sort of just faded into nothing. It just didn't exist. And that is looking at it with a little bit of hindsight saying, oh, we were supposed to get something really good and we ended up getting something flat instead. But even the heel turn itself, even the moment itself wasn't really that great. There were some great things about it. Cody said the F word, and that's very funny, and we all love that. And John Cena's beatdown of Cody was legitimately great. I don't think John Cena is a good worker. I think he's often a terrible wrestler in the ring, but his attack of Cody Rhodes after the Elimination Chamber match was really, really good, really physical, and you could really feel some venom in there. And it was a really hot start to Cena's heel turn in terms of physicality, especially after coming off the Elimination Chamber, where him and Punk showed some really good chemistry together as well. Surprise, surprise, John Cena and CM Punk have chemistry in the ring. But even so long after their previous feud, over 10 years since their last feud, they really displayed some great chemistry in there. So things were really, really looking good for Cena. But The Rock was there, and it didn't really make sense why The Rock was there. And Travis Scott was there, and Travis Scott was terrible, had some terrible kicks that legitimately injured Cody Rhodes, and it didn't make any sense for him to be there. And it just all felt a little bit confusing. Like, why is this happening now? Why is he with The Rock? Why is Travis Scott there? Why did John Cena agree to do this? It didn't really make a lot of sense at the time, and it makes less sense in hindsight. And after the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, when we go on TV and John Cena is supposed to be explaining himself through these promos, he cuts a decent first promo, followed by some of the worst promos you've ever heard in your entire life. And John Cena has been cutting promos for 25 years. And he's been an actor for at least 10 years. Like he's good at this stuff. But the material he was given was just so terrible because it was nonsensical. It didn't make sense why he turned heel, and it didn't make sense why The Rock is no longer in this storyline. That Cena sort of trying to tap dance his way around it and try to find a way to make this make sense really didn't work. And even Cody, who I feel like is one of the best promos in the game today, him coming in and also trying to make sense of this really, really just didn't work. Neither of these guys could really salvage this program through great promos because the program just didn't make sense. If we were just going babyface Cena versus babyface Cody on the road to Mania, you would get a lot of great stuff. We would sort of be leading into this Bret Hart versus Roddy Piper respect-based match at Mania, sort of like we got later at SummerSlam, rather than Cody trying to defend WWE and Cena saying that he's been in a toxic relationship with the fans for all these years. It just didn't make any sense. And I think that there was still some hype around it, and it was all still okay and could be salvaged because people were really, really high on the heel turn at Mania, and they were really excited about the idea of John Cena winning a title at WrestleMania, winning his last world title and then going on this heel run as the world champion. So even if the promos didn't make sense and the logic of the heel turn didn't really make sense, it would all be okay if they stuck the landing at WrestleMania. And boy, didn't they. John Cena versus Cody Rhodes from night 2 of WrestleMania 41 is, without a doubt, one of the worst matches I have ever seen in my life. I feel it is in the running, right alongside Jerry Lawler versus Michael Cole from WrestleMania 27, to be the worst WrestleMania match ever. It takes some effort to have a match this bad, especially one that is as hyped as this one is. It is the main event. It is John Cena's first match since his heel turn. It is John Cena winning his final world title to break Ric Flair's record, even though he's like a 25-time champion. Everything about this match should have been prestige, star power, smoke and mirrors to make a memorable moment, to make a WrestleMania moment. And it was utter garbage. It was 25 minutes long, which, hey, that's too long for a John Cena match. And if you think that's too long, buckle in for some of the stuff that we're going to get a little bit later down the line. It currently has a 3.36 rating on Cage Match. I gave it 0 stars in my WrestleMania review. It really was the worst thing that could happen at the worst time because a lot of people were starting to question what John Cena was doing in this heel run because he had cut promos that really didn't make a whole lot of sense up to this. The heel turn, while being entertaining, was seemingly not really panning out like people thought it would because The Rock hasn't been involved anywhere near as much. And in the build up to WrestleMania, when Cody and Cena were cutting promos against each other, they weren't really mentioning The Rock. They were just trying to dance around the idea of him and sort of mention him in vague terms. And really, they were trying to uphold this WrestleMania program on a foundation of sand that just didn't work at all. They didn't have sensible material that they could really make promos around. So Cena being an incredible actor and Cody being one of the best promos on the world today, even they couldn't produce something good in their promo battles leading up to WrestleMania. And then we get to Mania. A lot of people have said that this is an anti-wrestling match on purpose. And I do think that was the intent going into it because Cena, in the promos leading up to WrestleMania, has said he wants to ruin wrestling. He wants to destroy pro wrestling and become the last world champion in pro wrestling. And in order for him to do that, he sort of has to have what has been deemed an anti-wrestling match, where essentially he is on top for the majority of the match, doing an extended heat sequence where he is beating down Cody Rhodes in just some of the most boring offense you could possibly imagine. A kick, a punch, a clothesline, copy, paste 40 times over the course of 25 minutes. And even where you thought the intrigue would be and the fun would be when Cena's motioning down for someone to come out back and everyone's going, oh my God, it's The Rock. And it's Travis Scott coming down, walking down the entrance ramp for 17 minutes or however long he was walking. It was honestly insulting. I would rather watch a wall for 25 minutes than I would watch this match because at least when I watch the wall, I don't get actively pissed off. This match annoyed me so much because it was the antithesis to what good wrestling is. And I get that that was the point, but in order for you to do that, you do have to have a bad wrestling match. And it really tanked Cena's intrigue. For me personally, for a lot of fans, no, but for me, I was no longer interested in Cena because the big singles match that he has had up to this point has been one of the worst I've ever seen. The promos haven't made sense, the story hasn't made sense. It's just been all around bad. And really, the only thing that is holding this run up to this point is vibes. People are happy to see Cena in this last run. They're happy to see him as champion. They're excited to see what he does as a heel. But really, this Cody Rhodes match, though it never got worse than this, was a template for everything that would come. Really, really long, boring matches, a lot of nonsensical promos, storylines that sort of make sense but not really, and just a lack of overall intrigue and investment. I'm not going to spend too much time on the next couple months leading up to SummerSlam because honestly, it's a lot of the same. It is John Cena being paired with people mostly from his past to sort of get that nostalgia value out of the last John Cena run. But in that, he's cutting really bad promos. People are sort of having to dance around the idea that now he's a heel and he's sort of with The Rock, but not really. And his motivation doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, why is he trying to destroy WWE rather than just being sort of insecure about this being his last run? And also, the matches are never really, really that good. So let's start at Backlash, where we're looking at Randy Orton, his match with Orton. There was some intrigue in the lead up to this match. The promos were really long and for the most part not good. And people weren't necessarily excited to see John Cena versus Randy Orton, what's historically been one of the worst feuds in wrestling. Just dominating so much of 2008 to 2014, never having very good matches, two people who the crowd really just didn't want to see. So now this is the first program they're putting out there. It has a lot to go up against. And they didn't really set it up too well with the WrestleMania match being terrible and the heel turn not making a lot of sense. The stuff I've already talked about. If that stuff all worked, the intrigue for this Randy Orton program would have been very, very high. But as it was, No, not I wasn't very intrigued by it. I don't think a lot of people were. When it actually got to the match at Backlash, it was an okay match. I give it 3.5 stars. It's got a 6.23 match or rating on Cage Match, but it's long. It's about 28 minutes long, and it's much better than the Cody Rhodes match, but not really something great. A lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of ref bumps, a lot of weapon shots, just really not a lot to love. It was sort of a bland match. And in a series where they've had nothing but bland, if not actively boring matches, it just sort of fades into the tapestry of everything that has been John Cena versus Randy Orton. So, though it was better than his Cody Rhodes match, not really something that you would call a success, because the feud going into it didn't really build the matchup too strongly, didn't put over the history between these guys, and didn't really push the John Cena character into a more intriguing field. And then the match itself couldn't really do blow anyone away. So it was sort of a failure in that regard. And then we get to Saturday night's main event, where he is facing R-Truth. 4.6 on Cage Match. I gave it 2 stars. It lasted just under 5 minutes. This was sort of the most nonsensical part of John Cena's run up to this point, because it was technically a feud, but it only lasted like 2 or 3 weeks, and they they didn't really use R-Truth effectively. The way R-Truth should have been used is he should have been built up over the course of this run to sort of be the John Cena apologist. While everyone else is turning against Cena, R-Truth is the one who says he's my childhood hero. He's the person I most respect in this industry. I still believe in John Cena, only for him to be disappointed when John Cena ultimately doesn't turn face and beats him. But they sort of condense that story into just a week or two. So the pathos, the emotional payoff that you're supposed to be getting as a result of R-Truth being beaten down by his hero wasn't really there. And they didn't effectively tell that story in the match either. So this was just sort of something for John Cena to do. And continuing that, at Money in the Bank, we have John Cena teaming up with Logan Paul to take on Jey Uso and Cody Rhodes. I honestly don't remember this match at all. I gave it 2.5 stars. I don't remember a single thing that happens in it. I do remember John Cena and Logan Paul being on the heat sequence for a long old time. But I don't remember why this match happened. I know Jey Uso was feuding with Logan Paul, and Cody Rhodes was going to start feuding with John Cena again, so they were sort of tying those two programs together. But this never really led anywhere in the immediate aftermath. It was sort of just something to do leading up to another CM Punk singles feud. That's sort of where we're at. We're just sort of spinning our wheels with John Cena. And this is your world title program, your top heel in the company, your biggest star that you have in the company, maybe outside of Roman or Cody. And you're just sort of saying, yeah, we'll do R-Truth for 2 weeks, then we'll do this tag program for a few weeks, then we'll do back to R-Truth for a match on SmackDown that lasts, a little bit longer, but is much, much worse than their match at Saturday night's main event. We're just doing stuff for the sake of doing it, because we don't really have any real plans for John Cena. He's not around enough to effectively build a real singles program, because he's not there every week. He's there every other week, every 3 weeks, something like that. He's not a present figure on the television screen. So to build a singles feud between him and someone else is very difficult. We saw that in the lead up to WrestleMania when Cody was essentially cutting promos on someone who wasn't there. And we also saw that on the lead up to SummerSlam. Cody was cutting promos on John Cena, but we couldn't hear Cena's rebuttal because he just wasn't there. He wasn't on screen. So these things with R-Truth, with Logan Paul, with Uso and Cody, they're just things that you can build without Cena having to be there, which for your world title program is absolutely atrocious. It's things that, people complained about Roman Reigns in the latter half of his title run. When Brock Lesnar was the world champion, the part-time champion. These are the things that people have hated about the world title scene for the past 10, 15 years. And now we're getting it again in what is supposed to be this triumphant, feel good final run for John Cena. It just doesn't work. And then we get into his last feud before losing the title, that being with CM Punk at Night of Champions. And this match was sort of overshadowed by some of the controversy surrounding the pay per view being in Saudi Arabia. Now, I'll start out by saying I didn't watch this match. I don't watch any of the Saudi shows. I think that the shows are sort of unethical propaganda pieces that sort of wave in the face of like moral booking, I suppose. There's a whole history for WWE in Saudi Arabia that I'm not going to go against right now. But the reason that I bring that up is because at one point, CM Punk himself voiced his opinion on how terrible these Saudi shows were. The Miz was going to wrestle a match in Saudi, and CM Punk tweeted at him. I'm not going to repeat the tweet because it's very vulgar, and I don't even know if I'm monetized on YouTube, considering I get like 30 views per video. But if on the off chance I'm earning, a quarter of a cent from this video, I don't want to lose that. But he said some pretty nasty things about The Miz because he was going to Saudi Arabia. And because essentially he's saying, you're a sellout, you're earning blood money, you're doing all this terrible stuff. So now that CM Punk is wrestling in Saudi Arabia, a lot of people were criticizing his hypocrisy. And it's not the first time CM Punk has been criticized for being a hypocrite. But it was a really flagrant example. And the lead up to John Cena versus CM Punk was sort of dominated by that conversation, by what was happening off screen versus what was happening on screen. For the match itself, it got a 6.27 on Cage Match, 26 minutes. It seemed like it was the best match of his run so far, a little bit better than the Randy Orton match, but not by much. I feel like I wasn't missing much by watching because it seemed really long and really, really basic. And the majority of his heel run since WrestleMania has sort of just been, let's throw people at John Cena and see what happens. Randy Orton will get a nostalgia feud. Then we'll throw him in a program with R-Truth. Logan Paul will throw in there too. Let's keep going with R-Truth. Yeah, CM Punk. People like CM Punk. People like their matches. Let's throw in there again. There's no real stories there. It's just stuff happening around John Cena and not really that much good stuff. If I were to compare this to a title run, a really good title run, it reminds me of Gunther's IC title run, where every week he was just facing another guy. And sometimes he had stories with Drew McIntyre, with Sheamus, but a lot of times he was just doing random TV defenses against Ricochet, against Xavier Woods, against whoever. But it was a great title run because all of those matches were really good. And when you did get into the feuds, like with Sheamus, like with Ricochet, like with Drew McIntyre, they were great. They were really good TV, and you knew they were going to pay off in great matches. This wasn't that. This was John Cena sort of just being thrown randomly with people, and the promos leading up to them were bad, the storylines were bad, and the matches were bad. So really, from WrestleMania to SummerSlam, there was absolutely nothing to like about John Cena's run. If you don't have those John Cena rose-tinted glasses where you were a fan of him when you were a kid and you have that nostalgia for him, then there's just nothing here for you to really like. And even if you do have the nostalgia for him, how long can that really go? How far can your nostalgia really run for this guy before you start to just get overexposed to these terrible promos and these middling matches and these bad programs? I'm not sure. I don't know how far nostalgia carried some people in this run. Based on the reactions he got at SummerSlam, probably pretty far. But for me, I was really not a fan of what was happening in a lot of these feuds from day one from WrestleMania. I consider this 3 or 4 month stretch in between Mania and SummerSlam an absolutely abysmal failure in terms of booking, in terms of action, in terms of pro wrestling. It was a failure to create interesting pro wrestling, and I thought it was absolutely one of the worst things that we've seen this year so far. We started the video by talking about a seemingly out of nowhere random heel turn. So now let's wrap it up by talking about a seemingly out of nowhere random face turn. Because on the SmackDown prior to SummerSlam, John Cena just turned face. He just became a good guy. And it was so weird. There was absolutely no build up to it. There was no reason for him to turn face. There was no inciting incident within the storylines to show him turning face. Unlike his heel turn earlier in the year, where you had teases in the Rumble and in the Chamber, there was no teases to him being a good guy again leading up to this turn on SmackDown. It was just sort of there. And while I don't know the exact story, there are some reports, and whether these are real or not, they could very well not be. This is just sort of secondhand information that I heard from, one wrestling news aggregate, and I'm now spreading on to you. But apparently, a lot of executives in the company just thought this Cena run is absolutely terrible, and going forward, we want John Cena to be good. So we're just going to turn him face. And we don't need a storyline reason to do that, because we're just going to. He's a good guy again. Everyone clap. Everyone loves John Cena. He's a good guy again. It made absolutely no sense. But really none of his heel turn made any sense either. None of the promos or the stories he's had up to this point have made any sense. And based on what we got at SummerSlam, I'm not that unhappy about just this random face turn. The company essentially saying, hey guys, listen, we know it's been bad. We know it has sucked. Here's our pivot. Please like it. And we got to SummerSlam, and I did like it. The match with Cody Rhodes, I'm a little bit less high than most people, it seems. It's got an 8.57 rating on Cage Match, which is very, very good. I gave it 3.75 stars, which is the highest I've given any John Cena match this year, any John Cena singles match, that is. It went 37 minutes, almost 38 minutes. That's a long time. But one thing I will say about this match, and one thing I'll give it credit for, it never felt that long. Because it was really unique. Maybe that this match can only exist after the terrible title run Cena has had up to this point, where he was this heel nobody liked to watch. Not heel heat in the sense that he's supposed to get, but sort of go away, I hate using the term, but Xbox heat, where people just hated what they were seeing on their screen rather than loving the program but hating the character. They hated the program. And this was sort of a return to form. They had a really unique and engaging match. I'm not going to call it great because it wasn't great. A match that devolved into parody at some points. I'm not going to go over the entire match. I just released my SummerSlam review, so go there if you want to see my full thoughts on it. But it was a good way to end his title run because it ended with people being able to cheer John Cena one more time. And for him to have this match that was a Super Cena match with all the smoke and mirrors, weapon stuff, a million finisher kickouts, all of this really, really fun stuff to sort of just get people back engaged with John Cena. After this run that has been so boring, this match was just a lot of fun. And people really, really are high on it as a result because they are contrasting it to everything John Cena has done this year, which has been so incredibly boring. And maybe that's being too critical on the match itself because as a standalone match, I do think it is really good. And I think that there's a lot of stuff to really, really love in it. But I do feel that it is viewed more highly because of everything that came before it, and because it's finally like, oh, thank God, we're finally getting a John Cena we can get behind. We're finally getting a match that is good and has some intrigue to it. We're finally getting some meat out of this program, and it's not just this long cascade of nothingness that has been the majority of John Cena's run in 2025. We're getting something actually good that fans like, that they want to see, that they want to cheer for, which is something that has been completely absent up to this point ever since the heel turn. So this match, while not being, the perfect way to end the story, sort of a weird a weird way to end it, with them just turning him face for the sake of the match and for the sake of the fans. Probably ultimately the right decision. But if they had made a lot better decisions up to that point, they wouldn't have had to do that sudden last minute pivot. But what we got was very good. Now, going forward, John Cena is no longer world champion. He has lost it to Cody Rhodes. He is seemingly going to be paired into a program with Brock Lesnar. In my opinion, and we'll see, we'll see. I'm going to release a video a little bit later this week on Brock Lesnar specifically. This is the worst follow up you could do, because the John Cena Cody Rhodes match succeeded because it had such good vibes, because people were happy to cheer for Cena again, sort of similar to Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 18 when he was facing The Rock, and people were just like, you know what? Whatever, he's the bad guy. We're cheering him. We love Hulk Hogan. At SummerSlam, in this arena, people love John Cena. They just wanted to cheer for John Cena, and they gave him a match that they could cheer for. A really, really fun match. It really brought the vibes up and made a lot of people happy to see John Cena again. So now to pair him with such a controversial figure, someone who is just so swarmed in negativity right now because of his involvement in the Janelle Grant lawsuit, because of all this controversy around his involvement in sexually harassing this woman who was part of the WWE system and was sort of so just used by that system and by the people in it. Brock Lesnar potentially being one of those people. Bringing him into John Cena's run is, in my mind, such a terrible idea, because it just adds bad vibes to the program that they're going to have. And people aren't going to be talking about John Cena versus Brock Lesnar. They're going to be talking about the controversy that surrounds Brock Lesnar. John Cena requested one of his final programs to be against Brock Lesnar. I think it's a complete wrong move. I think it is an absolute misfire. I think that it's been terrible all year, and the Cody Rhodes at SummerSlam has been a high peak of it, but it is not going to continue along that path. It's going to drop off again after this Brock Lesnar feud and really end on a whimper in my mind as a result. I think they really saved it with Cody and then immediately fumbled the ball at the end by bringing Brock back. But that's something I will talk about at a later point when I make a video solely dedicated to how terrible of an idea it was to bring Brock Lesnar back into WWE. I guess my overall thoughts on this John Cena title run would be, it was really bad. And it's not bad for the reasons I thought it was going to be bad, because I think John Cena just generally isn't a very good wrestler. And I don't love a lot of his promos where he thinks he is building a match by burying people. I just don't love John Cena. This run was not bad because of John Cena. This run was bad because of the booking, because The Rock threw a wrench into the work and made them change their plans. But then after Mania, you can't blame The Rock for some of the terrible stuff they've done. It really partly was a consequence of John Cena just not being there enough to continuously build interesting singles programs, but also the stuff they threw at us was just really boring and didn't spark interest, didn't really do anything unique for Cena. We didn't see any new interesting pairings for John Cena. He fought R-Truth, Randy Orton, CM Punk, and John Cena and Cody Rhodes, all people who he's had programs with in the past. We didn't see anything new. We didn't see anything exciting. So it was just a lot of dullness across the John Cena title run. And being the main thing in WWE this year, the big program, the main event of so many pay-per-views, the thing that the company has been focusing so much creative effort on this year, really doesn't paint WWE in a good light. I think that this John Cena title run has been one of the worst things we've seen all year. There hasn't really been anything good or redeeming about it, except for the heel turn and the match with Cody at SummerSlam. Other than that, it has either been dull to downright terrible to insulting to the fans. And I don't know how we're going to finish up the year with John Cena, or how this run will be looked at 5, 10 years down the line. But having lived through it and having watched John Cena's presence or lack thereof on screen as the world champion has been a hopefully unpleasant experience, in my opinion. Now, I'm a very negative guy, and I don't like John Cena very much, so that would be my perspective probably. Unless they really knocked it out of the park with this Cena run, I would probably be down on it no matter what. But I feel they've really, really dropped the ball, and even people who are fans of John Cena would admit that even though it was fun to see John Cena and there were some nostalgic parts and there were some things to like, overall, this run has been a failure. But I want to know what you guys think. If you agree with me, let me know down in the comments below. If you think I'm way off base, way too pessimistic about it, way, way too negative, let me know in the comments down below. Because I very well could be. I don't like John Cena, so I don't have the naturally ingrained interest in a story of his that other people would. If you are that person and you have love for John Cena and you have this nostalgia for him, or you just genuinely love the guy and want to see him on your television screen, let me know what you thought of his title run, of some of his matches down in the comments below. And also let me know where you think we're going from here. What is John Cena going to do next, and what is the rest of his retirement tour going to look like? I'm really interested to know your guys' thoughts on that. I'm going to be releasing a video later this week talking all about Brock Lesnar. I am doing a little bit of research. That's why it's taking a longer time to release than just one of these opinion videos, where I talk about why I think bringing Brock Lesnar back to WWE is such a terrible idea. So keep your eyes open for that. It won't be nearly as fun as some of the other videos I released. But I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a like, please comment, subscribe, all that stuff. That really does help a new channel like mine to grow. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video and continuing to support the channel. I have been Isaiah from Hot Tag Wrestling. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.